In the second PowerPoint of the internal business environment, we're going to have a wee look at leadership. In the last PowerPoint under management styles, we looked at managers and leaders and how they tend to be different. Managers tend to be a more traditional way of thinking about people who lead or manage an organisation, and we looked at a number of theories under that. Henry Mintzberg, we looked at Henry Fayol. These are some of your earlier managers. So as I say, what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about leadership and who leaders are and traits, etc. The ability to influence the thoughts and behaviour of others. That's how we would define a leader. Now, we did speak back in the first unit, as I said, about managers, and the terms management and leadership are often used interchangeably. Often today, the term leader replaces managers, which historically that was the norm. However, I think it's really important to note that leaders are slightly different. And that leaders are there to inspire and motivate their workforce. So it's a different type of managing, if you like, to be able to form these people called leaders. A leader will also handle change and be able to shape the future of the organisation. So we've not got the traditional, they still do a bit of planning, organise, command, control, coordinate, the Henry Fayol roles of a manager. However, leaders are now more inspirational people, they're more motivational, they try to work alongside their staff as opposed to telling them what to do, and leaders tend to handle change, as I say, and they want to look at the organisation and how they can change the future of it. A leader will also seize opportunities in order to move the organisation on. So these tend to be a lot more positive, a lot more about inspiring and motivating your staff, changing the shape of your organisation for the future, etc. So this little table here on the third slide shows you roles, if you like, of managers as opposed to roles of leaders. And you can see that on the left-hand side, we're dealing with the roles of the manager, and they're very much kind of what we talked about under management styles, especially our earlier theories about administrating, doing all the kind of the boss work, if you like, doing all the paperwork, dealing with complexities, following specific procedures, focusing on systems and structures. There's something we talked about when we talked about the classical style of management. They've got subordinates. They very much are distinguished between themselves and their subordinates. They rely on discipline and control, all about doing things right, all that kind of thing. If you look at the table on the second part of that, or the right-hand side, you can see there's more about innovation, change, handling challenge, vision. You can see the wording's very different. They've not got subordinates, they've got followers, they inspire trust. They're there to do the thing right. Instead of doing the thing right, they're doing the right thing. You can see there is very much a difference in the language that we use between the roles, if you like, of a manager and the roles of a leader. So once again, to hark back to Fayol, we looked at Fayol back in management styles, and managers are there too, as we've said already, to plan, organise, control, etc., where leaders are involved in setting direction and aligning people to achieve goals. So what they're really trying to do is make sure the best person is going to help them achieve whatever the goal happens to be in the organisation. It's a lot more inspiring, a lot more motivating. So as far as leadership theories are concerned, many leadership theories try to explain why some people are more successful than others in getting people to follow them. And these include the following. Now, what we're going to do here is we are not going to talk about in this course the style theory. The style theory very much relies on what we spoke about at higher with autocratic, democratic and laissez-faire styles of management, or leadership, should I say, in this case, management or leadership, because they both follow the same kind of thing. But we're going to concentrate in this section on trait theory and contingency theory. However, it is important for you to understand the style theory and remember back to higher for autocratic, democratic and laissez-faire styles, because they will indeed very much kind of shape your contingency theory. So first and foremost, the trait theory. The trait theory approach states that the ability to lead a group of people is something that you're born with, not something that they learn. So it's more or less something you'd have spoken about further back in school, perhaps, was about the difference between skills and qualities. And we talk about skills being things you learn and qualities being things or traits you're born with. And what the trait theory believes in, that people are selected as leaders rather than trained to be leaders. So it's not a skill you learn, it's a quality that you're born with. So trait theory suggests that leadership is unique to only a select number of individuals, and that these individuals possess certain immutable traits that can't be developed. So traits are qualities, if you like, characteristics that are born in people. So you can't learn to be a leader. The trait theory believes that you're a natural leader, and these are some of the characteristics that leaders may have. So we've got things here, there's a whole list of them, so I'm not going to go through them all, but things like initiative, ambition, self-confidence, being assertive, being competent. Adaptive's a really important one if you're dealing with change. Ability to motivate, having integrity, doing the right thing, empathy, understanding if there are issues with your staff and trying to deal with them, being trustworthy, being creative. So these are all traits that a leader should possess, or certainly possess some of them. So these are, you're born with these things, you don't learn these things. So a little bit more in trait theory. Most of the early work on the trait approach investigated the difference between leaders and followers to ascertain any discrepancies in personality and physicality. So what made a leader different from the followers? Many early theorists would argue that regardless of the situation, there is a set of traits which should result in a successful leader. So we mentioned them obviously on the previous slide. Now, trait theory is criticised in a number of fronts. So if we had to look at problems of trait theory, then here are some answers or some of the ideas. Measuring traits objectively is impossible, which leads to unfair judgments and may result in inequality in the workplace. How do you measure how much integrity someone has, how much empathy someone has? These things can be really difficult to do, and that might be that we are making unfair judgments, and people who become leaders are perhaps maybe not fully justified in being leaders. Trait theory usually only focuses on how leader effectiveness is perceived by followers. So there could be way more to it than that. We're only looking at how followers see a leader, oh, they're a really good leader because, and it might just be a couple of things. And of course, we're asking the followers, what about people on the same level as them? Deciding which traits are needed for a particular type of leadership position is difficult. There are so many traits there that you potentially could have to be a good leader that it might be a specific type of leadership dealing with a particular group of people, situation that require different traits. And how do we decide what those traits are? There are too many physical and personality traits that are said to affect the ability to lead. There are lots of them. As I say, that list of maybe 20 on the other slide there are only some of them, but there are so many traits that might make it difficult to affect people's ability to lead. How do we know? There are too many expectations in real life to accept that these traits are required for a leader to be successful. So how do we know that these are the traits that are going to make a leader successful? Because there are so many different traits out there that we don't actually know that these ones are the ones that are required for a leader to be successful. A leader could be successful without some of those traits. Trait theory is subjective to the situation or organisation the leader operates in. This is going to take us on a little bit later to look at the contingency theory. Leaders in one situation may not be leaders in another situation. So it depends very much. Maybe you are a really, really good leader in a crisis, but you're not very good on a day-to-day basis, or vice versa. So it's really, really difficult. It's very subjective. It depends on the situation and the type of organisation you're working in. So a leader in a public sector organisation could operate in a very, very different way from a leader in a private sector, flatter structure type organisation. It focuses on personality traits more than evidential or measurable traits, such as social skills and problem-solving skills. So the trait theory doesn't really look at people's ability to problem solve, because that could be something that you're learning. That could be a skill you're learning. Social skills, once again, a way you learn these. So it could be that they're focusing too much on personality traits or qualities rather than more of your skills, and that could be an issue too. The little YouTube link here at the bottom of the page will talk about trait theory in a little bit more depth. So these Next few slides are part of the higher course, and I've just put them in here as a little reminder of the 3 different leadership styles that we spoke about at higher, that we used to have to be able to talk about at advanced higher. I think a knowledge of them is really important, as I say, to understand the contingency style of leadership later on. So obviously we are looking at the authoritarian or autocratic leadership style. This was where at higher we talked about the leader having absolute authority. They don't consult with subordinates on decisions, they make decisions themselves. They discourage upward communication. They don't really want to be communicating much with their staff. They just want to make the decision. They don't necessarily trust employees to make decisions. They don't feel as though they're worthy and able to do that. They tend to motivate through threat and punishment. They dictate to employees and tasks that they've to do and how they do them. There's no choice involved. They expect subordinates to obey orders without receiving any explanation. So it might be they're just told to get on with it. That's their job, do it. They're often viewed as being controlling, bossy and tyrannical. So when would you tend to use authoritarian leadership? Well, in situations where work is repetitive and boring, if you remember back to the management styles, and we looked at Fred Taylor's scientific management theory, he believed that work generally is repetitive and boring and they need someone who is in command, a unity of command. He spoke about that at the time. When something is happening urgently, so you've not got time to consult, it might be someone just at the top has to make the decision. So an urgent decision being required, or little time for collaborative working or discussion. Once again, that could be because something's urgent. When clear direction is required, it might be quite a complex task and they feel that the leader really needs to give direction here and help with the decision making or pretty much do it. When the leader is the most knowledgeable, maybe the leaders had this experience before and they know how to do it and the subordinates are simply carrying out the task. It might be that you've got a number of new staff or untrained staff who don't really know the job very well and they need to be led. In situations of conflict or confusion, if situations are going to cause some kind of confusion or workers, there's conflict among workers, then it might be that it's the best thing to do is for the leader to take charge and make the decision. Where a department maybe has been badly managed on previous occasions, you might need to kind of tober the staff up a little bit again and the leader will take command. Or where high output is required, because that could be quite a pressurised situation. The second type of leadership is obviously democratic or a participative style of leadership. And this is where the leader shares problem-solving responsibilities by perhaps setting up teams is a good way to do this. The employees are very much involved in the decision-making process. However, the leader will make the ultimate decision, but they will listen very much to staff and what they have to say. The leader might end up making decisions, but will explain why the decision has been taken. They'll take time to explain why the decision has been made. There will be a discussion prior to the decision being made, as in a sort of consultative style, but as I've said before, it will come back on the leader to finally make the decision. The leader will rely on the specialised knowledge of team members. They may know a bit more about the situation than the leader does, so they'll be using them for knowledge, etc. And they will encourage communication upward through perhaps things like quality circles, works councils, things like that, where workers are allowed to give feedback and they will be listened to. And also the leader offering guidance to team members and maybe being part of the participation. They might participate in the group as well, which is quite important. They will recognise and encourage achievement, so that's quite important too. So this is very much a more participative style of management where the workers feel valued and they actually feel as though they are contributing to the organisation. So when would this style be used? Where the leader wants the employee to share in the decision-making process, maybe the leader wants that to be because they feel that if the employee is involved in the decision-making process, then they'll participate more and they'll be more enthusiastic about the task in hand. Where employees want a high level of job satisfaction, you might want to keep your staff because they're really good quality staff. You might feel that if you let them participate, then they'll get job satisfaction and they'll be prepared to stay with the business. Where you maybe need a lot of input from different ideas from different people to solve the problem if it's a bit more complex. When participation and team building in the organisation is encouraged because that's just the corporate culture of the organisation and that's what we do. When you maybe require some flexibility, it might be there's flexibility in the decision being made and it can be done in different ways. It's good to hear different ideas. And maybe the leader lacks the skills and knowledge that the employees do have, possibly because the leaders may be perhaps quite new and the employees have been with the organisation for a while. Laissez-faire is where basically organisations give employees a free rein to make decisions and carry out activities. So the leader doesn't really interfere in group activities. It's quite important here to realise that the leader isn't sitting back and not doing anything. They will give some kind of introductory instructions or ideas to the groups, and the groups will get on and be creative and do this themselves, and the manager or the leader is there if required, if there are any questions to be asked. So the leader doesn't interfere. They delegate authority and power to employees, giving them a high degree of freedom, which can be very motivating to staff. They provide little or no direction for the team because they do want them to be creative. The team is largely self-governing because by doing this, they feel as though they might get more out of their staff using more of their own initiative. The team may be expected to set their own goals, resolve their own problems, and make their own decisions without consulting senior management. Now, that makes it sound as though the senior managers or leaders are not getting involved. They just want to give employees this free rein so that they can be as creative as they want to. Ironically, it really requires a highly competent leader to set up teams initially, select the best employees for the task, and maintain motivation throughout. So you can see that despite them giving the employees a free rein, they do have to be pretty competent because they need to know who'll work well together and who'll bounce off each other to provide really good quality work, because that's the important thing with laissez-faire. If it's left, it could be that employees sit back and don't actually do any work. So it is important to kind of get that balance of, you know, the best people for the tasks and trying to keep the motivation of staff up. So when would it be used? When you do trust your staff very much, when they're highly skilled, experienced and educated, so you know they've got lots of ideas, you know they've got lots of skills and they really know their stuff. When they have, as I said, got this trust and loyalty to the firm, they want things to happen in the firm, they want the firm to do well, they want the firm to make profits, they want this safe, secure job, and you know that they can be trusted. They're motivated in making their own decisions, they actually enjoy making decisions, they've got pride in their own work and the drive to do it on their own, so they really do have initiative and they want to be creative and carry that on. And it might also be in a situation you would use laissez-faire when you've maybe got outside experts, consultants and things being used, where the leader can actually take a back seat and let the consultants actually help and be part of the task. So finally, we're going to look at this contingency theory, and this is the last theory of leadership we're going to look at. The contingency theory seeks to take many more variables into the equation, and it suggests that the most suitable style of leadership will very much depend on a number of variables. The underlying assumption is that a style of leadership that works in one set of circumstances, your autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire, will not necessarily work in another. So the best leader isn't one who adopts a certain style or who holds certain traits, but someone who can adapt to different situations, and they can use different leadership styles in different situations. Now, Fielder has a contingency model of leadership, and he identified 3 different characteristics which determine the nature of situations so that the most suitable leadership style could be adopted. So what he thought was, he believed that the relationship between the leader and the members of the team or the group, the structure of the task, and this thing called position power, the power position that someone holds, the leader holds in the organisation. Now, if you take a look at the diagram in a little bit more detail, you can see that what do we mean by leader-member relations? So the degree of confidence of the group in the leader's abilities and having mutual trust and respect between the leader and subordinates. Now that's obviously quite strong. However, it could be that the relationship between the leaders and the members in the group is poor. The leader might have to shift focus away from the group task to regulate behaviour and control conflict because the members of the group don't have that much confidence in the leader. So you've got two opposites here, one where they've got a lot of confidence in the leader and one where they've not. And that might mean that they actually have to lead in a different way. As far as the structure of the task is concerned, whether the task is easy or difficult, structured or unstructured, routine or varied. So very much the structure of the task there, it's clear what you're actually doing. However, if you're in a situation where the task is not particularly clear, the task might be ambiguous, there's no clear solution, there's not really any correct approach to going about it, then that could be a different scenario altogether. And then the position power, how much authority was invested in the leader's position within the firm? Okay, so that's really important. How much authority do they have? Or leaders in high positions of power have the ability to distribute resources among their members, meaning that they are able to reward and punish their followers. So they have the responsibility to be able to reward staff or punish staff. So whereabouts do we sit here in the firm? Do you have a lot of power? Do we feel as though you've got a lot of power and that you can give praise? You can punish, if you like that word, staff. That's really, really important. So in Fielder's contingency model, there are two categories of leadership. We've got the people-orientated approach and the task-orientated approach. Now, as far as the people-orientated approach is concerned, we are looking at styles like democratic management or leadership style, laissez-faire style, and these are associated with McGregor's theory why. This style of leadership is effective where the work done by the employees is enjoyed, it's liked, and it might even be that they're not particularly fond of the leader, but they do enjoy the job. They are being motivated by the job. Task-orientated is where you're using autocratic authoritarian styles of leadership, and these are associated with McGregor's theory X. Now, this is effective if the work is disliked as well as the leader being unpopular. So there's really not a lot good there. And it might be that the leader has to come down on the staff, because with the people-orientated style, if they enjoy the work, they'll still do it, even though they're not fans of the leader. However, if the work isn't liked and they're not fond of the leader's going to have to come down hard on them. So these are the two categories. Fielder believed that leaders who are more task-orientated are good leaders in extreme situations. So what we're saying there is the task-orientated approach, you tend to find that they have a stronger authoritarian style. And this is what Fielder was trying to say. Leaders who are more task-orientated are good leaders in extreme situations. Now, what we're talking about there is, you know, the task has got a clear structure, the leader's got a lot of authority, there's a lot of trust in the leader. Whereas we've also got this extreme unfavourable approach where there's not a lot of trust in the leader, there's no structure to the task, and the leader has got very little authority, in which case they really have to be effective and try and come down on the staff as much as they can. So with Fielder's contingency model then, leaders who are people orientated are good leaders in situations with average trust, structured work and high power. He did believe it's difficult for people to change leadership style. Now, he agreed it is difficult for people to change leadership style. His model suggests that improving effectiveness can often require a change in the workplace, the culture and environment to fit the leader. So it might be that the organisation has to change to be able to fit the leader who's in post, and we call this job restructuring. He believed it's important to match leaders to the approach of the organisation. So that problem there is, like, if you've not got a leader who fits into the workplace, the culture, etc., then you really have to change that workplace to deal with the leader. Then we've got Handy, and Handy suggested that any leader must take 4 factors into consideration before they can determine the leadership style that they're going to use. The leader themselves, that's their characteristics and the way they like to work. The task, what the job is, the processes, where they're aiming for, what they're aiming for with it, the subordinates, what do the subordinates like by way of a leadership style in the different circumstances, and the environment, the organisational setting of the leader, the group, and the importance of the task. So what kind of organisational, is it a strict corporate culture or a very relaxed one, etc. Handy suggested there is no perfect style of leadership, so a leader must achieve the best fit for the different situations. Hersey and Blanchard had a situation approach. Their approach believed that leadership behaviour should differ depending on the situation and the maturity. So what we mean by maturity is the work experience of the employees, the ability level, the willingness of employees to accept responsibility. There's a lot of different things going on there. They define maturity in two ways: job maturity, which is referring to the worker's skills and knowledge of the job they're doing, and psychological maturity, referring to the worker's self-image, self-respect, self-confidence, how they actually feel in the workplace. For example, new employees would relate to autocratic leadership to start with because they're new to the job, they're not familiar with the setting, they've not got a lot of self-image, self-confidence, etc. And more democratic as they settle into the job because they gain these things. And then as they become a lot more independent, they might prefer a laissez-faire style of management because they can do things in their own way. So that was what Hersey and Blanchard believed. They defined 4 styles of leadership. You've got this telling leadership, where you're basically telling your staff what to do, which is autocratic. Selling leadership, there's still a bit of direction for workers in there, but they're not fully confident. You're trying to still sell the task, sell the job to them, so you've still got to kind of keep some control over them. Participative leadership, for workers who are able to do the job, but perhaps they're not really that willing to do it. The leader's concentrating on the relationship more than the task to be carried out, so it might be that they are a bit more democratic, trying to come and go with the staff a little bit. And then you've got delegative leadership. These are for more mature workers where the leader simply oversees the task. That's more like a laissez-faire style of leadership there. John Adair is someone else who, under the contingency theory, who believes in an action-centred leadership. He believed that in any situation where a group of people are trying to achieve some goal, one or more of the group will emerge as the leader. He believed that the role of the leader involved 3 interlinking responsibilities that all need satisfied. The tasks overlap because the task can only be carried out by a team, not the individual. So as well as developing the individuals, you really need to make sure that they're working as a team. The team can only achieve task performance if they're all fully developed. If they're not all fully developed, then someone may be holding you back. And the individuals need the task to be challenged and motivated. So they really, really need the task to be challenged and motivated, or they'll not feel that the task is maybe hard enough for them, complex enough, something that's really going to challenge them. So that's quite important too. Adair believed there were 8 functions of leadership. These are defining the task, so we're a little bit here, but a wee bit of fail. Setting clear objectives, providing direction for the task. Planning, looking at alternative ways to achieve the task. Back to fail. Briefing, creating the right climate and getting to know the members. That's maybe something that's a little bit different from fail's management style. You want to get to know your staff. There's that kind of leadership, inspiring them, doing that kind of thing. Controlling, making sure you're using your resources efficiently. Evaluating, really, really important, making sure that you assess the result and see where you can actually make improvements. Motivating your staff, once again, something that was really important, added to fail's management style theory later on, not by fail. Setting challenging targets, giving praise when required. Organising, obviously using good time management and delegating, that was another one that was in fails. And setting an example. Once again, this is something that's been added as more of a leadership function here. Establishing trust and respect from subordinates and employees and letting them learn from the leaders, which is quite important. Andrew Brown is another contingency style leader, and he believed that there were 6 roles of leadership, which all leaders use depending on the circumstances they find themselves in. So you've got heroes. who are great leaders. They're liberating heroes and role models who devote themselves to the collective good, so they really throw themselves into the task for the good of everyone. The actors, the best leaders are skilled actors, able to deliver authentic and convincing performances. Immortalists are admirable leaders. They're visionaries with high self-esteem, whose organisations take on their personalities, so they're probably quite strong people. They're power brokers. These are top leaders and shrewd dealers in power who accomplish goals by mobilising others to act on their behalf, so they get other people to do the work for them. You've got ambassadors. High-performing leaders are diplomats who use their interpersonal skills to develop valuable networks of external supporters, so they'll find different stakeholders, if you like, to help them achieve their goals. You've got willing victims. Effective leaders are, when necessary, content to make a personal sacrifice for the sake of a cause in which they believe. So it might be it's not their way of doing something, but they know that it's going to be good for the common good, so they'll do it that way instead. So there are several versions of contingency theory. As you can see here, we've talked about Fielder's contingency model with your people and your task orientated. You've got Handy, you've got Hersey and Blanchard, their situation approach. You've got John Adair with action centred, and you've got the 6 dimensions of leadership. So you've got a lot going on here that are quite important for you to note. Okay, this is just a wee task, a wee research task on here using the internet. Research one of these theorists and prepare a presentation on their work. So what factors then do affect leadership? Well, clearly the time available to do the job. If it's, we talked about busy crisis type situations are taking time. Respect and trust. The respect and trust you gain and you give to your employees, information you've got available. The skills of your staff will very much determine the style of leadership or the type of leadership theory you use. Internal conflicts, are there conflicts among staff, between staff and leaders? The nature of the task, the leader's personality, the group and the worker's personality, the people in your group, the size of the group, and we maybe talked a little bit about that when we looked at teams. The culture of the organisation is a very strong corporate culture or a pretty relaxed one, and the financial constraints of the organisation. These things are all going to affect the way in which you lead your staff. What about qualities of a leader then? Here are some examples here: honesty and integrity, risk-taking, administration and organisation. How organised are they? Are they fair? Are they warm and caring? Do they have communication, good communication skills and charisma? Are they tough and assertive when required? Do they have confidence and they can rely upon themselves to do things properly? Have they got clear vision and innovation? And are they able to negotiate? So once again, if we look at a summary of this type of approach as we have with the others, this approach believes that leadership effectiveness is based on a combination of the leader's personal characteristics, the nature of the situation, the work, the organisation, the subordinates, and the external environment. We've got a lot of different things going on there, a range of different factors that we have to take into account. And that's why it's a contingency approach, because it will depend very much on these different factors, what type of management style the manager uses. A leader's style could be people-orientated and task-orientated based on contingencies, depending on how it works. Leaders can't easily change their personality. Therefore, the leader should be matched with the situation for maximum efficiency. So they should really be put into a particular situation that suits them best. Different leadership styles may also be effective depending on the situation. The best leader can adopt different styles in different situations. And Handy believes there's no such thing as the right style of leadership, but it'll be most effective when the requirements of the leader, the subordinates, and the task fit together. So there's quite a lot in there. Now, this next task is reading your course notes on contingency theory and attempting these 2 past paper questions. Discuss in detail a variety of contingency theories, so you're looking at all the ones we've talked about there in the PowerPoint, and describing factors which influence leadership style. Some of these factors are there at the end, and some of these factors are at the beginning of the PowerPoint presentation. So then, what are the advantages then of effective leadership in an organisation? We're going to look at advantages of good and disadvantages of poor leadership. Employees will be more motivated and gain more job satisfaction if they have an effective leader. Good relationships will make the organisation more productive. Employees will be more empowered if they're allowed to have work delegated to them. Improved communication will lead to better decision making because your workers will also have some good ideas. Keeping the workers on track so they meet their targets. It's also quite important to set targets and keep to them. Less confusion about what workers have to achieve, so the work is quite clear cut. Team members are more likely to support each other, so there's less stress involved. Better career prospects as employees are more developed, and it becomes a much more competitive organisation. So these are all good advantages of effective leadership. Let's finally look on the last slide here about the disadvantages of poor leadership. Employees will be confused and unclear, so the job might not be done properly. There's more likely to be conflict between the team members, and the job might not get done properly for that reason. Employees are unlikely to be motivated, and it will take them longer to meet their targets. You might find that morale might be poor, and there'll be more likely to be high staff absences and staff turnover. A firm with poor leadership will not be monitored, and therefore employees will do the minimum required. So if they can get away with it, they will. That's what we're talking about, the laissez-faire one. You've got to be sure that your employees are going to work really hard to be able to use that style of leadership. And employees are unlikely to be able to work under pressure, and team members will suffer from stress or will be unable to sustain a high standard of work. Thank you very much.